Abstaining from alcohol for an extended period of time is the most important thing that I've ever done in my life.
As far back as I can remember, I never really had any dreams or goals. I could never look ahead and see myself being an adult. I never really wanted to be anything. I started drinking alcohol in high school, and in college it turned into what I would consider a full-blown problem. It contributed to poor grades, a lot of weight gain, taking semesters off of school, and then eventually leaving college after 5 years with a mountain of debt but no degree. I kept drinking throughout my 20s with no real plans for the future. I ignored my responsibilities, and I got a DUI, and even that didn't change my behavior at all. It was easier to keep doing what I was doing than it was to confront the fact that I had a problem. When I got my second DUI, right before my 30th birthday, I still didn't change anything. Luckily, I was employed, but when something like that happens, you have to find rides to work. I was managing at a bar downtown, and at the time, my mom also worked downtown. She was supposed to pick me up one morning and give me a ride to work. The night before, it was a Sunday night, and like every Sunday night, I went out drinking with coworkers and friends. We stayed out late, I blacked out, and instead of Ubering home like I had planned, I ended up sleeping on one of their couches and woke up the next morning to a bunch of missed calls from my mom, wondering where I was at because she was at my house to pick me up to give me a ride to work. This isn't an easy story to tell, but it's an important one. Wrecking my own life wasn't enough for me to change, but my mom sacrificed her entire life when she was still just a kid to give my siblings and I a chance at a better life than she had. And these are my words, not hers. But I know from experience that that was what she was doing. At a certain point, I realized that I didn't want to squander the opportunity that she had given to me. So that was the moment that put the wheels in motion for a lot of change in my life over the last 6 or so years. Even though I was working at a bar at the time, I just decided one day that I was going to quit drinking. Looking back at it now, I still don't really know how I did it. I didn't ease into it. I didn't ask anyone for help. I didn't join a program or anything like that. I just decided that I was going to quit. But I knew that I needed to put some distance between myself and that lifestyle, the partying and the drinking, not just on weekends, but most days of the week. I didn't have a light bulb moment or some instance where I knew that I for sure was on the right path. Almost without really knowing what I was doing, I was just sort of taking things day by day and getting healthier and starting to see things clearly for really the first time in my adult life. And that actually brings me to the first thing that I want to talk about as far as what I learned over the course of 5 years of not drinking alcohol. Eventually, I realized that I was starting to see things very differently. Like I said, there wasn't this light bulb moment. I can see clearly now, didn't start playing. I could feel that I was changing my life and that I was thinking about my health and my longevity in different ways. I had always wanted to travel more, and so I had this idea that I would try to look for a way to get paid to travel. And with working at a school, I was going to have that upcoming summer off. So I ended up getting hired to be a breakfast chef at a dude ranch in Wyoming. If I had never stopped drinking, not only would those pieces not have fallen into place in order to make something like that happen, but I don't think that I ever would have had the mental clarity or the foresight to even consider doing something like that. I think most people know that alcohol has negative short-term impacts, even though it makes us feel good. I think most people know that over the long term, alcohol is very detrimental to your health, especially if it's abused. But I think what's talked about a lot less is that sort of like intermediate impact that it has on our lives. And for me, it was sort of like this ever-present fog that never lifted, if I can be poetic about it for a moment. When you're constantly hungover or drunk or thinking about when the next party is going to be, your cognitive function is so impaired that you really don't have the capacity to critically think about things. One thing that I've realized more recently is now that I've gone through these different periods of completely abstaining from alcohol for years, while I was striving to achieve goals, and I was working hard. I was working full-time, I was in school full-time, and I was taking health coaching certifications, to now still working hard, working full-time, and also striving for new goals in my life now, but supposedly having this balanced relationship with alcohol. It's not quite the same. Even though I'm not going out and getting blackout drunk every weekend anymore, there's still a significant mental impact. And it's not something that you're probably ever going to realize until you take time off of drinking alcohol. Almost every time that I have taken time away from alcohol, I feel this acute sense of a rise in inspiration or motivation. I feel this intense focus on the things that I'm trying to accomplish, and I get new ideas, and I start thinking about things differently. And you can call it motivation if you want, but motivation is fleeting, and it's not something that we can rely on, but it is something that you can take advantage of in the short term when you do feel it. And I don't think that we should ignore, or at least I don't want to ignore, that correlation. The intensity of the focus that I have towards things that are important to me in my life during the periods when I've been abstaining from alcohol is significantly different than during the periods when I am actively participating in drinking alcohol, even if it was only 1 or 2 drinks a night. Granted, most of the time, 1 or 2 drinks a night was almost every night. My understanding is that most of the research shows that you can have like 2 drinks per week without it affecting your cognitive functioning or affecting your sleep. I mean, I hope that these colors come through on video because it is ridiculous. Unfortunately, I don't have a memory in my adult life of setting a goal, putting in the work to achieve that goal, and then actually achieving that goal prior to the point where I stopped drinking. I'm sure that there was an instance or two where I actually did something like that, but it wasn't important enough for me to actually commit it to my memory. I guess that deciding to stop drinking and then actually stopping drinking was probably the first, but that wasn't really a goal. It was more of a necessity. That was something that just had to happen. I won't go as far as to say that it was life or death, but it wasn't far from that. You know, I was putting myself at risk. I was putting other people at risk. So to say that that was a goal that I set for myself that I then achieved would be not 100% true. So feeling capable of setting goals and achieving them and having that sense of accomplishment really wasn't something that I had ever felt until I stopped drinking when I was 30 years old. And the first big moment for me was making the decision to look for a summer job out west and then actually going through the process and making that happen. That was my first kind of like oh shit moment where I realized that I was actually capable of doing things like that. Once I got out to Wyoming, I had a few more of those moments where I would go hike by myself. I would do really long day hike. I did, got up to doing like 15 miles in a day. I had never done anything like that before. So to say that going out to Wyoming was a turning point for me mentally, physically, everything, would be a massive understatement. Not only would it be an understatement to say that, but it also helped to really shape the next 6 or so years of my life. Here I am at 30 years old, having this completely novel experience of being in Wyoming for the first time and working at a dude ranch. I didn't even know what a dude ranch was before I got out there. And now I'm not drinking for the first time since I was 16 years old. It was sort of like this inflection point in my life, and it promoted a mountain of change. Pun definitely intended.
I feel like this is a bad idea because my camera is not secured. I'm gonna try and talk about important stuff and not crash. Maybe I just won't talk about anything important and we'll just use this as a little transitional B-roll. I guess it's not B-roll since I'm talking. I'll just shut up and we can make it B-roll. It's been a while since I took quote-unquote landscape photos, which is how I got into photography in the first place. That's one of the whole reasons that I am talking to this camera right now, is because I wanted to take landscape photos and just evolved into this. Learning photography was actually one of the first things that I sort of learned how to learn. I learned how to teach myself something. Going back to college online in my 30s was still, that's an established educational system. Picking up a camera and trying to learn how to take photos and then using YouTube basically to teach myself everything that I know today. I've never like taken an actual class or like had someone show me anything. Not to brag. That's just how easy it is to learn things. And had I not stopped drinking, oh shit, I actually am kind of talking about what I wanted to talk about. But had I not stopped drinking, I don't know if I ever would have picked up a real camera. So had I not stopped drinking, I wouldn't be making this video right now. It's a very interesting thing to think about, all of these little steps in your life that have to happen just right. People talk about it all the time as far as like all these things in the universe that had to happen for you to be born and for you to be the person that you are. But even on a smaller scale than that I feel like is a little bit easier for us to wrap our heads around is each decision that you make in your everyday life. Like that could be a decision that ends up having a huge impact on the rest of your life. The weight of that, when you actually consider that, is pretty heavy. Not to make things seem too serious, but that's a little bit of a burden to think that, granted, deciding to stop drinking because I had a problem with alcohol wasn't an everyday decision. That's not just some small thing. But deciding to stop drinking led to going out west, led to wanting to buy a camera to take pictures while I was out west. And also, if the cameras on cell phones were as good back then as they are today, I probably never would have bought a camera. So that's, just the point in time that all happened is interesting also. Or maybe it's not, I don't fucking know. It seems interesting to me right now as I'm driving down the road talking shit. All right, so we're in a new location obviously now, but before I move on from this point about like learning how to learn, I wanted to say a few more things about just how important it is for me to be the kind of person who actually has a desire to learn things. I started reading for really the first time in my life, other than a few books here and there, when I went out to Wyoming for that summer. So I grabbed a couple of books, and I forget exactly how I ended up coming across it, but one of the books that I read that summer was Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. That led me down this path of figuring out what Stoic philosophy was, and that kind of led me down this self-development path. So now not only did I have this desire to learn things in general, but I had a desire to consume all of this information about how to better myself. I mentioned that when I went back to school in my 30s that I was learning, but I was still learning through these established educational systems. And this period of my life where I stopped drinking and started reading and started teaching myself things was the first time in my life that education had been something for myself outside of just doing education for the purpose of school. Learning something for the purposes of school is all well and good, but I can't say enough about what that process was like for me to finally want to learn something for myself, seek out the information, and then teach myself a skill. I can't say enough about that process and what that has meant for my life and how I've been able to get things done in the last 6+ years. So if you've been paying attention so far, you can probably start to notice this trend, or you can notice this correlation between all of these benefits that I got from abstaining from alcohol, where I first had this mental clarity and focus. Then I was able to get some stuff done and figure some things out. I developed this sense of accomplishment and capability, and now I'm even really focusing in on this skill of learning how to learn. Everyone has something that sort of shapes who they identify as, or how they identify themselves within the construct of society and the world. You might not wake up every day and look at yourself in the mirror and say, I identify as a mother, or I identify as a gardener, or a CEO, or whatever. You probably don't say that to yourself, but a lot of people view this identity as being fixed. as something that is just part of who they are and something that they can't change even if they try. But one of the most important things that I've learned over the last half decade or so of my life is that nothing is fixed. If you have the desire to change something, you can change it. For more than a decade, I identified as a drinker. It shaped my decisions, it impacted my mental and physical health, and it was probably the most influential aspect of my day-to-day life. I didn't even necessarily realize this at the time, but one of the hardest aspects to change in your life is a complete identity shift. A lot of people try to change habits and behaviors, but if you can change that identity first, then that's sort of like the center of this ring, and then all of these other things sort of expand out from the center. And so I think, I said earlier in this video that I kind of don't really understand how I was able to quit drinking the way that I did. But when I look at it through this lens, it does actually make sense because, like I said, this wasn't a conscious decision. I didn't really understand what I was doing. But because I changed my identity from a drinker to a non-drinker, I didn't, especially the language that I used, if people asked me if I wanted to go get a drink, if they didn't know that, they didn't know my background and my history and that I had quit drinking, I didn't say, no thanks, I'm trying to quit drinking. I just said, no thanks, I don't drink. Research has shown this a lot with smokers, where typically what you hear from someone when they're trying to quit smoking is they use that language. They say, I'm trying to quit smoking. Whereas with someone who decides that they're going to quit smoking and someone asks them if they want a cigarette, the people that say, no thanks, I don't smoke, are way more successful in changing that habit for the rest of their life, as opposed to the people that just say, I'm trying to quit. The language that you use with things like this is really important. Our brains are very powerful things, but they're also malleable. So the way that you talk to yourself in your head can actually change your brain's perception. It's your perception, but it can change neurotransmitters in your brain so that you view yourself in a different way. I don't think that I have to caveat that with I'm not a scientist, but I have read about this shit. For the longest time, it was thought that after age 25, our brains were no longer plastic. I heard Andrew Huberman talking about this on a podcast, I think with Rick Rubin, where they were talking about creativity. And I think some neuroscientists, I don't know, maybe the 80s, 70s or 80s, actually won a Nobel Prize for the work that they did on neuroplasticity and how you couldn't change your brain after the age 25. Well, now, decades later, it's been proven that that's completely false and that we can still change our brains, and our brains are still susceptible to the behaviors that we take part in and the things that we do that can help to change the way that we think. And I believe that they've shown that after age 25, it's not quite as malleable as it is before. But you are still able to change. And I think that there's plenty of evidence for that anecdotally. To think about the amount of damage that I did to my brain from age 18 to 25, especially, when your brain is super susceptible to all of the information that you're giving it. It's kind of scary to think about that. And I wish that was something that was... I'm going to get off on a tangent here. I wish that was something that was taught more to young people, that the ability that you have at a young age to impact the rest of your life with the information that you consume during that age, or the damage that you can do on the other side of that, whether it's drugs or alcohol or whatever you're doing, that damage to your brain can be significant and have a very big impact on the rest of your life. And there are definitely times where I feel like I'm sort of playing catch up for those years. The last thing that I want to talk about as far as like the things that I learned is how big of an impact that not drinking alcohol can have on your health. And when all you've ever known as an adult is alcohol being a big part of your life, you have no idea what it feels like to actually be healthy. Sleep is a huge part of the health aspect of not drinking. So there's long and short-term impacts on your sleep from drinking alcohol. A lot of people will say that they need a drink of alcohol, to help them sleep better at night. But even 2 drinks before bed can massively disrupt your sleep. I'm sure almost everybody has had those nights where they crash and just pass out after, just having 2 drinks. But then you wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and you have a really hard time getting, you just toss and turn for the rest of the night and can't get back to sleep. I think it's pretty obvious to people, if you go through that experience, you probably know that you didn't get a good night's sleep. But even just having a couple of drinks before night can make it a lot harder for you to get into deep sleep, which is very restorative for our brains and our bodies, and it's a necessary component of our sleep cycle that you need to be able to get into. Back when I was drinking a lot, before I stopped drinking for the first time, most of the time when I would drink, I would drink heavily. Once I started drinking again more recently, I can remember having a lot of nights where I would just have like 1 or 2 beers in the evening, and I was pretty good about paying attention to my sleep from the years that I spent without drinking at all. But I had a lot of nights where I know that I was asleep for 8 hours. I don't remember ever waking up in the middle of the night during those times. And I would still feel like really drained the next day, like I had no energy. But it was because I had had a couple of beers, and even though I slept through the night, and even though I got 8 hours, the quality of that sleep was terrible. I probably wasn't getting into deep sleep, and so I wasn't like restoring my energy levels. But it's frustrating because you think to yourself, like, what the hell, I got 8 hours of sleep, but those 8 hours of sleep were dog shit because you had 2 strong IPAs. I currently have to stop talking because of alcohol, essentially. I'm filming this on the night of the Super Bowl. Everyone else is outside of my room drunk right now. If COVID had never happened, there's a chance that I would still be working in fitness today, and maybe I never would have started drinking again. But that's not what happened. And as I sat at home doom scrolling and watching the news, not knowing what the hell was going to happen or what I was going to do, I just figured, what the hell, I can have a few beers. What else am I going to do? And for the most part, it was fine. Alcohol slowly made its way back into my life. I think I did a really good job of reintroducing it in a healthy way. And I don't think it really had any negative impacts on my life for a while. But as time went on, there was sort of this ramping up effect that I tend to have with a lot of things. And then I had to kind of scale back. I would take time off here and there, and I always felt better, but I never really considered completely abstaining again. And then more recently, it became more and more a part of my everyday routine. Like, I felt like I had to go have a beer after a long day at work. There's been certain times over the last probably 8 months or so where I had started to have some thoughts about maybe I should quit for an extended period again. And one of the reasons that I had that thought was when I started to pass up plans that I had for my creative work in favor of drinking. My creative work is supposed to be my priority, but how can I honestly say that I'm putting everything I have into accomplishing the goals that I have in that area of my life if I'm choosing to go have a beer instead of doing something to work towards those goals? If I hadn't done the work in the past to be more comfortable about changing something about myself, I think that this would probably be a lot harder. So quitting this time around is more about being the person that I want to be. Letting go of something can be painful. Letting go of a part of yourself can even feel like a breakup, I think. It's almost like you're letting go of another person, this separate version of yourself. Now you might think, well, yeah, it's easy to let go of 15 years ago. That's a long time. Most people change over 15 years. But even right now, I already feel like a different version of myself. I feel like a different version of myself from the point when I stopped drinking the first time when I was 30. I feel like a different version of myself from when I reintroduced alcohol. If you aren't looking back at different points in your life and seeing yourself as a different person and seeing yourself as you move forward, hopefully as a better version of yourself, then I think you're leaving a lot on the table. This isn't me judging people for drinking. Obviously, I've been a drinker more often in my life than I haven't been a drinker. I don't like the dichotomous thinking that drinking is good or bad, but it can be good or bad for certain people in certain situations. It isn't one or the other. There's so much nuance and gray area to everything in life, and this is no different. A Greek philosopher over 1500 years ago said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river, and he is not the same man." It's funny how something like that can still have so much relevance today. I think that shows the difficulty that people still have with change. People weren't accepting of change 1500 years ago, and we still aren't as accepting of change as we probably should be. I think we have a really hard time letting things go, and I'm not sure if that's a FOMO thing, that we're afraid that we're going to miss out on something if we change who we are. If I'm a drinker and I go out to bars and I meet people, am I going to miss out on meeting my future wife because I stopped drinking? Well, I mean, I guess maybe you could, but once you make that decision, you're on a new path. So if you're on this new path where you're not drinking, why would you be concerned about missing out on meeting your future wife at an event where you would be drinking? If this is the version of yourself that you think is best for you to move forward with, then why would you be worried about the version of yourself that was going down this other path? I don't want to get too much into dating and relationships, but I think most of us who are single we should be trying to create the person that the people that we're attracted to would be attracted to. Did I say that right? I think that made sense. So like with most things these days, I will treat this as an experiment, and I will iterate as I move forward and make changes if I feel like I need to. Abstaining from alcohol for the purposes of being sober is one reason to quit drinking. I'm just trying to live more in alignment with my values and do the things that push me closer to achieving my goals. And so right now that means not drinking. Abstaining from alcohol for an extended period of time is the most important thing that I've ever done in my life. That is not hyperbole. That is not an overstatement. It truly is the most important thing that I've ever done. The things that I talked about in this video are sort of the tip of the iceberg as far as the benefits that I think that I got from abstaining from alcohol. If you've been a drinker for most of your life, and I'll say this with the caveat that advice is often overrated, just because something works for me doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. But if you've been a drinker for most of your life and you've never went an extended period of time without having alcohol be a part of your lifestyle, there's nothing that you can do that will level up more than quitting drinking. As with most habits, if you can start small, you're more likely to find success. Abstaining from alcohol for the purposes of being sober because you have a problem is one reason to quit drinking, and I think that it's the reason that most people quit drinking. It's the reason that I quit drinking the first time, but this time is a little bit different. This time I'm choosing to abstain from alcohol because I want more energy and time to focus on the things that I truly care about. I'm trying to live more in alignment with my values so that I can do the things that I need to do to get to where I want to be and accomplish my goals. At the risk of being redundant, I can't say enough about the benefits that I've seen in my life from extended periods of abstaining from alcohol. Drinking alcohol is such a socially acceptable thing that I think that the way that most people view it is you either have a problem or you don't. You understand how to have balance in your life or you don't. But what I don't think that most people consider, and even what I didn't consider, even the first time that I stopped drinking, I never really considered that even having a balanced relationship with alcohol could still potentially be holding me back from anything. I'm not demonizing balance or moderation by any means whatsoever, but if I had the opportunity to do something that basically is like having a rocket ship up my ass in terms of being able to move towards accomplishing my goals, then that's something I'm at least going to consider. I like to think of there being like seasons to life where during these certain seasons, we're focused on one thing more than another. We have a different priority for this different season. You're not constantly prioritizing one thing always. So maybe one season of your life, you are prioritizing recovery. You just went through, maybe you got a promotion and you were working your ass off or something, and so you're burnt out a little bit and you need to rest and you need to recover. Right now, this season of life that I am considering myself to be in right now, this is a period of growth. This is a chance for me to move forward exponentially. And if I can do something right now that is going to double my output or 10x my productivity or whatever the benefit that I'm going to get, I'm going to consider that. So for this season of life, I'm not drinking. I'm completely aware that this message is not going to resonate with everyone. I'm not making this video for everyone. This video is for a certain amount of people. This video is for myself, obviously. I always try to make these videos about topics that are important to me and interesting to me. So if you're struggling and you're not where you want to be in life and you feel like maybe alcohol is holding you back, then yes, you are the type of person that I think should consider abstaining from alcohol. For most other people, I think that it's a little bit less clear, but hopefully something that I talked about in this video will get you thinking about things a little bit differently, and maybe consider it. Maybe you consider it for a short period of time and see how it feels. By no means am I an expert in any of this, and I probably shouldn't even have to provide this caveat, but this isn't a video about addiction. I'm not going down that road. So if you're someone who falls into that category, then seek help outside of this video, because this video is not going to cover those types of problems. All right, that's all I have for you. I'm going to wrap this one up. Hopefully I can keep this one shorter than 30 minutes. And leave a comment if you have any questions about any of this stuff, and I'll try to help if possible. And as always, I love you all.